revolution today. I wanted to start, if I can get this to work. Or where is it? Computer didn't computer me. Oh, I'm pushing the wrong way. All right, now I can go right there. I wanted to start by talking about how, well, you mentioned Gloucester. I actually just made a clarification. Gloucester is the oldest settled fishing port, the oldest history of settlement and fishing in the U.S. There were certainly people before the Europeans arrived in Gloucester and started to fish. So it's a really important piece to remember. And in fact, with the lessons we're learning about our food system in general, go way back, go beyond any of the settlements that we're all familiar with. The Native Americans and first people really set the stage for what we're now bringing back many of our food systems. So it's true again with fishing. But when it comes to fisheries issues, I have a go. I've been working on fisheries issues now for about 20 years, and I've always been puzzled by the lack of the food element of the conversation when it comes to fisheries issues. Fisheries policymakers and decision makers don't look at their work through the food system lens, even though the justification for killing marine animals is apparently because we want to eat them, because we have to eat them. We kill them because we have to feed the world. That's what we hear all the time. Yet fisheries managers don't evaluate the success of the fishing industry based on whether or not we're feeding the people well, or whether or not the lessons that we've learned from the rest of our food system are actually applied to the marine-based food system. But I can almost understand where they're coming. I don't excuse it, but I understand they're very slow, very entrenched. And to give them a new way of thinking is almost like trying to shift a major paradigm that's going to take us a long time. We're working on it. The second piece is the lack of seafood conversation in the food system conversations. And that's the part that I think puzzles me the most, because seafood is about the only food that we eat that actually has the word food in it. We don't have pig food or cow food or carrot food, but we have seafood. Yet we don't include it in our food system conversations, and I'm puzzled by that. And so because we know that fishery managers and marine conservation world is going to be slow to catch on, we really need the food system folks to be the revolutionaries here and to embrace seafood in your conversations, which is why I'm so excited to be here, because I think the revolution has begun with including seafood in this conversation today. But I did a little bit of searching for images on the internet to try to figure out, do I see seafood in at least the imagery of our work? And I don't. And I think that tells us a little bit of where the absence of that recognition is. And so I think the revolution starts with us starting to include fish in our images and seafood in our images and start to make that connection for people. Because when we don't, the revolution that's been driving fisheries has been the wrong kind of revolution, and some of it that you're all very familiar with. It started off with the industrial fishing revolution. Much like industrial agriculture, industrial fishing revolution has gotten rid of small-scale operators. It's been replacing small-scale operations, essentially saying that they're way too inefficient. Much like the arguments that we've heard about small-scale farming, they're too inefficient. They can't feed the economies of scale around the world, or as our science coordinator said, they can't plug the leading arteries of global trade. And so I want to point out that one of those small-scale operations that's considered too inefficient is actually being run through this ware fishery by one of our board members and her family. This is 4 generations of one family fishing on a very inefficient, according to the models. The one in the yellow oilskins is actually our board member. And this is a very effective way of fishing, the old way, the Native American way, the stationary wares. But there are other similar small-scale operations that are feeding their local food systems through their seafood operations. And so this industrial revolution has brought us some of the similar players that we know in agriculture. And they've been the ones that have been telling the fishermen in this case, you either got to get bigger or get out, and not paying them enough, controlling the market, controlling the production process, controlling essentially every aspect of the seafood business. And currently, they're even trying to buy the rights to fish, controlling the access to the fisheries to start. We call that seafood 1.0, the Industrial Revolution. And these are some of the images of the Industrial Revolution: high scale, high volume, low value fishing, that doesn't do any service to the animal or the quality of food that we get. And in some cases, industrial scale agriculture that, just like we saw with the chicken, is feeding wild fish, or in this case, farm-raised fish, antibiotics and hormones and their own relatives, and they call it the Blue Revolution, mimicked from the Green Revolution. And so we have next the free market revolution. That kind of came in tandem with the other revolution. We just talked about the industrial revolution. And this free market revolution has brought with them what I'm calling Seafood 2.0, has brought with it again certifications that tell you what seafood to eat, and these yellow, red, green lists that tell you what fish is safe enough to eat. And those have been good to educate us, but they have actually mostly emboldened some of the other players that have been dominating the rest of our food industry. Because they're the only ones who can afford those certifications, they're the ones who can buy that little organic label to put on their food, and they're the ones that come ahead and say, we are the ones carrying the banner of sustainability. We're Walmart. Buy our fish. And this is not the kind of revolution we're talking about that we need in the seafood industry. We need a real revolution in the seafood industry called Seafood 3.0. And it's a community-based revolution. And it started a few years ago with the very first model stolen from agriculture, community-supported fisheries. We started with one pilot project in May, and today, community-supported fisheries are putting people in touch with their fish, making them recognize that it has a tail and a head and guts, and that it actually is an animal. And it's making people face the fishermen that they catch their fish, ask them questions, find out why they fish, how they fish, where they fish, and why it's important that their fish be eaten by us and not the fake breaded finger squares and modified things that we see often on the diaper and the supermarket. Since 2007, community-supported fisheries have now grown to about 30 in North America. They are the community-based revolution that we needed to spark a conversation in fisheries, because not only are they giving us access one-on-one to locally caught seafood, they have sparked a broader conversation that we really needed to have. We've had farmers market where fishermen are actually there to sell. In fact, yesterday, in these slides, we're going to get ahead of something I'm going to say, but we've also gone to the schools working with institutions, and they're right here in your town, Fletcher Allen Healthcare, that we heard about earlier, has been leading the revolution in the healthcare industry by being one of the first hospitals that have been working with us to use locally caught seafood. But I wanted to focus a little bit on what I said about the farmers market. Yesterday I was at an event in Boston with the mayor announcing the end of a 70-plus year prohibition on the sale of local seafood in the farmers markets in Boston. It was an exciting opportunity, because here we have a coastal community, much like many coastal communities, that don't allow the sale of seafood in their farmers markets and on public properties. It took us about 5 years to have that conversation, but there we are. This revolution that we're talking about, I broke this. Something came apart. Oh wait, I fixed it. So this revolution that we've been talking about, I've started to see some images that are now including fish. Our local farmers market, Cape Town Farmers Market in Gloucester, the Boston Local Food Festival, State of Maine Local Food Coalition, and all of these images have something in common. They all have the fish element in their images. And it took about 50 pages down the little Google image search before I came upon the Local Food Coalition's logo. I already had the other two. But that tells you how far we have to go in order to get this real seafood revolution in place. And it does start with this place. I feel like the seafood revolution is merging with the land-based revolution. You can kind of feel it in this room. It's a little palpable, and it makes me look fun. And I think it's really important, because I think the surge of energy that comes from these two revolutions merging together is going to be really powerful and quite unstoppable. And I will close with the words of the fishermen. See, I want to close with the words of the fishermen from Port Orford, Oregon. We're meeting, we brought all the community support fishery coordinators together earlier this month in New Hampshire, learn from each other, figure out what the challenges were and what they needed to do to move forward. And we talked about what a revolutionary idea community support fisheries have been. And he came up with a new word, and I want to leave you with this. Actually, we should probably all say it out loud. Viva the revolution.